Welcome everyone to tonight's debate. For those of you who are new, we are the Literary and Scientific Society, so we are the debating society at Queen's. It is my pleasure. My name is Matthew. I'm the president for this year. We have some fantastic guests here this evening as well, including our very own guest chair, Tony Gallagher, which you'll hear from later on. Tonight's motion is this House believes Biden's presidency has been a failure. Before we get to that, we're going to go for council announcements this week. So, first announcement I'll get out of the way is we are putting forward nominations for the Literific Trust, which is basically my boss, effectively. I'm putting forward two people for the trust. So basically they're providing a bit of an advisory role in terms of what this year looks like and how we can improve and bring in better high quality speakers and also find venues and stuff on campus for next semester. So first I'd like to nominate Tony Gallagher for chair of the trust. This has to be voted through by the House, so can someone second as well? Someone second? Grant. All those in favour of Tony Gallagher being chair of the trust this year, raise your hand now. Okay. All those against, raise your hand now. Oh, anyone? all those abstaining, raise your hand now. Grant, that is passed. Congratulations. That would be pretty awkward for later on if not. Finally, also putting forward Ryan Hoey to be secretary of the trust. Can someone second that? Second. If you're in favour of that, raise your hand now. If you're against that, raise your hand now. Of course. If you're abstaining, raise your hand now. Grant, that passes as well. Thank you very much. So do we have any other council announcements? Yes?
Right, so I'm planning to season stuff and everything, and obviously we filmed the term hard for most of the year, and hopefully you won't hear me a lot exactly. But there was a lot of good condition. So if you, for some reason, cannot do a debate or think that you might be under too much academic pressure, can you please let me know a week in advance? I will not be confirming your speakers a week in advance, because I'm kind of all drawn out to last minute and I also have exams and it's low-key stressful. So please give me a week in advance. I'm also in the same position and I get like text at 4 AM saying that you can excel on the next day so you can't do it. Like, you know the examples there. I'm really sorry guys. Also for next week, I want everyone's confirmation that they are speaking. I have Jenna Calman, Cormac Mascaran, Thomas, Tansha, Kira, Megan Hewitt and Terence. I will message you all if you're not here. Please come to me after to confirm that you are speaking. If you do not confirm to by tomorrow, we'll post this on social media. If it's not confirmed tomorrow that you can speak, I will be filling in your spot just in case. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else got any council announcement? Yes?
So I'd say thank you to everyone who came to the Halloween pub crawl on Monday. I think I took 2 lessons away from the pub crawl. One, don't go to Kremlin on Halloween without tickets. The second lesson from it is to take off the makeup before you go to bed, because otherwise you get like a terrible rash around your sort of eyes, which isn't very nice. Yeah. So those are my 2 lessons, and thanks for everyone who came to it.
Thank you. Two equally valuable lessons there for all members of the Literific. Any final comments from council members? Speak now, forever hold your peace. No? Grand. So then it is my pleasure to welcome, yes, it's my pleasure to welcome
Josie.
No.
Yes.
Owen, later on, is it? Oh, I have it down here. Josie to read the minutes from last week's debate, so give you some round of applause.
Welcome to today's debate. Before I begin, I'd really like to thank our treasurer, Jamie Warren, for filling in as secretary last week. I know he did a really amazing job. So on the 27th of October 2022, the Queen's University Belfast Literary and Scientific Society convened for the 6th ordinary meeting of the 174th session for the motion, "This House would abolish mandatory coalition." As usual, the meeting began with announcements. Ryan Hoey, HLM, thanked everyone who attended the Stormont Mixer and encouraged members to attend the Halloween pub crawl on Monday the 31st of October. President Matthew Taylor nominated Theo Burton to be appointed as the Society's Welfare Officer for the year. This was seconded by Ryan Hoey and ratified by a unanimous vote of the House. After a reading of the minutes, the meeting moved to private members' business. Ryan Hoey raised the issue, the Irish government proposing joint authority as an alternative to direct rule in the event of the executive not being re-established. Responses were heard by Sam Hazlitt, James Orchin HLM, Dermot Hamill, Theo Burton, Terence Metcalfe, Tony McCann, Gary So, and President Emeritus Danny McCormick. Channeling his inner Jim Alistair, Ryan Hoey accused Danny McCormick of being a neo-colonialist for supporting the proposal. Megan Hewitt raised the replacement of Liz Truss by Rishi Sunak as Prime Minister. Responses were heard from Dermot Hamill, Maya Lynch, Danny McCormick, and Will Polland. Chloe Rafferty brought up the controversy around Queen's branding being on a report supporting a united Ireland. Responses were heard from Megan Hewitt, Dermot Hamill, and Tom Burns. After President's questions, the vote of prior opinion was held. There were 20 votes for aye, 16 votes for nay, and 15 abstentions, so the proposition had it. First on the proposition, giving his maiden speech, was Theo Burton. He argued the ideal system of government for Northern Ireland is a voluntary cross-community coalition. Theo highlighted the failures of mandatory coalition, referencing the fact that Northern Ireland has been without a functioning government for half of the period since the signing of the Belfast Agreement. He concluded by saying that there is no incentive for the continuation of mandatory coalition, as it has resulted in the very stagnation of government we are now experiencing at Stormont. First in the opposition was Jack Hanlon. He began by criticising the historical dominance of Unionists in Stormont and argued the Good Friday Agreement necessitates mandatory coalition to prevent a similar situation from arising. Jack stated that voluntary coalition is an abstract idea that cannot be applied in a post-conflict society such as Northern Ireland. Second on the proposition, giving his maiden speech, was Will Polland. He argued that while mandatory coalition made sense in 1998, it is time for Northern Ireland to move on. Voluntary coalition would reduce the veto power of the DUP and Sinn Féin, allowing the formation of an executive to tackle the cost of living crisis and alleviate pressures in the NHS. Will concluded his speech by looking to the future and the potential of voluntary coalition to provide a better quality of life for young people in Northern Ireland. Second on the opposition was Dermot Hamill. He started his speech by emphasising the profound effect of the Belfast Good Friday Agreement, referencing the vision of John Hume for the parties to put aside their differences and work together for everyone. Dermot argued that Stormont needs the input of Unionists, Nationalists, and others to work in the context of a divided society. He closed by saying that voluntary coalition does not eliminate two-party domination, using the example of Fine Gael and Fianna Fáil in the Republic. The final speaker for the proposition, also giving his maiden speech, was Tom Burns. He started by lamenting the instability of the current system of mandatory coalition, but also expressing hope about the potential of Northern Ireland. Tom went on to talk about the changing attitudes in Northern Ireland, with the liberalisation of social views and increasing numbers of people identifying as neither unionist or nationalist. He concluded that voluntary coalition is the only way forward to ensure functional devolved government. The final speaker for the opposition was Ciara Swell, HLM. She began by highlighting the vagueness of the model supported by the proposition and the potential under voluntary coalition for a government dominated by one side of the sectarian divide. Ciara claimed the problem of political stalemate at Stormont would not be solved by abolishing mandatory coalition, as the polarisation in Northern Ireland politics would still exist. She finished by arguing that voluntary coalition would only present new risks without solving the problems identified by the proposition. Questions were heard from James Orchard, HLM, Daniel McCormick, Luke Maguire and Maya Lynch. Following the debate and questions from the House, the vote of speakability took place. There were 24 votes for the proposition, 26 votes for the opposition and 3 abstentions, so the opposition had it. May I take the minutes as read?
Thank you very much, Josie. It's now my pleasure to turn our attention to private members' business. This is your opportunity to ask the House for their thoughts on things that are happening in the news, things that are going on campus, anything that you think is relevant to the House's opinion. So if you have a point you want to raise, you can raise your hand now. Yes. State your name for the minutes, please.
Ellie Byrne, what do people think of the apparent potential letters of no confidence in Sunak in terms of after his cabinet reshuffle? Are we going for a third Christmas? Are we going to be doing the 12-day Christmas countdown? Who do we think is next, since they're all seem to be just hopping on the train and getting a wee turn?
Any thoughts on Rishi Sunak's crisis of some sort? Yes, state your name for the minutes, please.
One of the big issues, I think, with the way the Tory party is run and its rules, basically, I think there was a recognition after the train wreck that Truss oversaw and how Boris was ousted as well, and the kind of bad blood ensued from that. Tory MPs wanted a really quick kind of bloodlet, quick contest, and they didn't want to go to membership for fear of like another Truss happening, basically. But I think what Sunak will find is that he basically doesn't have a mandate, and it's going to be difficult to resist calls for a general election. Particularly, I think it was briefed out yesterday that he had every single campaign pledge that he had made during the summer is now under review. So we're now in a situation where the Prime Minister gained office by being voted by a couple of hundred MPs. He doesn't have a mandate, and we don't know what his policies will be. So it inspires a lot of confidence, doesn't it? I think he'll make it to the next general election, but it'll all depend on the economic circumstances, his policy agenda, and whether he can kind of just make it seem that he's more confident than the last one.
Yeah, state your name for the minutes, please.
Noah Barnley. I personally think that the Tory party is now filled with Sinn Féin sleeper agents. Purely from the fact that when Rishi Sunak got in, for however long he's been in there, the Tories, they've gained a little bit in the polls. It's almost as if the Tories themselves want to tank their own party. Personally, I'm loving it.
Thank you. Yes, state your name for the minutes, please.
I'm here. I'm now taking signatures for a petition for my houseplant Brian to be elected as Prime Minister. At least it would be good for the environment, I guess. There's not much else that the other Prime Ministers are doing at the moment. So.
Thank you. Yes, state your name for the minutes, please.
I think this is something that all the people who are pro-European should support, because quite frankly this is making our politics far more Italian. Where, I suppose, as much as revolving door prisons as they have in America, legislated on revolving door number 10, or was the Airbnb was described as. And yeah, I mean, at this point, I think everybody should get a chance to be Prime Minister and get it known the history books.
We've got that show on Channel 4, Make You Prime Minister. Maybe someone from there will be next. Any further thoughts on Rishi Sunak or just general government stuff? Yeah.
I think.
State your name for the minutes, please.
Right,
Thank you.
I think the problem that the Conservative Party faces is that they've got so many backbenchers now who've only just come in the last few years, because Boris has purged the party of lots of the so-called big beasts of the party, and they don't know what it's like to have ever been in opposition, and they don't know what it's like to have to take difficult decisions. Like, you can't imagine the period from 2010 to 2015 when you had, Lib Dems and the Conservatives in power together. The Lib Dems back then would have took sort of more hard decisions on different issues than lots of the Conservative backbenchers do these days. And lots of the backbenchers don't seem to realise that when you're in this middle point, you're bound to be behind in the polls. It's remarkable if you're not behind in the polls at this point in the election cycle. So any time there's a slip up or a controversy, they all panic and think, oh, we need to get rid of our, the leader of the party. And that's kind of just how they ended up in this mess. Because they just can't hold the nerve or take tough decisions or do anything.
Thank you. Any other points of private members' business? Yes, you can
So essentially, Brazil was looking. Because this week, for those of you who don't know, a massive election occurred where essentially Bolsonaro, I believe, Bolsonaro, essentially lost. Which was massive. He was very right-wing. He supported the deforestation of the Amazon rainforest and was quite harsh in his COVID policy. And now he has been essentially replaced by someone who's slightly more left-wing but has been accused of corruption. Whether that is real or not, who knows. But yeah, I want to see what the House's thoughts of it were.
Yes, state your name for the minutes, please.
Adam Race. With the corruption charges, a lot of that is down to the fact that that was under the right-wing government. As him being a socialist, they immediately found a way to imprison their opponents, which is basically the story behind that. Not to mention that Bolsonaro is like 10 times more corrupt than anything could possibly be. I think more of the worry is that he still, I don't think, until now, has accepted the results of the election, Bolsonaro. And so the fear is that, because he has a lot of control of the military, that he might try to use that to cause some sort of insurrection. I don't think he will at this point, because he's just been hiding away in his home and pretending it's not happening, seemingly. So we'll find out.
Yes, state your name for the minutes, please.
James Urgent. I think so. Once I didn't take look into the last I think it was only 51
Oh no, it
margin in the election. And the fact is, I think going into the election, polls were something like 60-40. So I think it does show that polling is not great in Brazil. I would point to that. I think parties that are right of centre control the large majority in Brazilian Congress, which means that Lula, as opposed to the case, when he was last president between, I think, 2003 and 2010, using Bush for policies, I don't think he has a chance then, and there's a constant threat of impeachment. And then just one point there, it wasn't, I don't know if you're referring to it, it wasn't Bolsonaro, it was his predecessor government, the Bush really, what was under Justice Department at that time, the Bush really corruption charges against Lula. I personally think that this is perhaps actually the best result that Bolsonaro could have got. He narrowly lost. There's allegations of voter fraud. Lula has buried a mandate, and his voting base is basically people who didn't want Bolsonaro. He doesn't have a friend in Congress, and the Congress might try to impeach him. So I think honestly, much like saying that in Israel, he'll be back next time, and I would be very surprised if he didn't win.
Do you know what the voting 60-40, which way was that? Do you know which way that was? For which candidate?
He had significantly in continuing polls. For the first round, I think it was predicted he might actually win outright, but he didn't. And Bolsonaro greatly performed. And Bolsonaro still performed in the polls this one time.
Yeah.
It was the difference of a 0.%.
Yeah, I think it was 50.1 and 49 or 0.7 or something. Yeah, thank you. Yes, state your name for the minutes, please. Yep.
Gary Stone. I personally believe that the election of Lula has something to do with him being released from prison, because we've seen this happen before in Mandela's case back in South Africa and Anwar Ibrahim's case back in Malaysia. Three of them were basically let go before the elections, and one, so maybe some advice for the Tories. Maybe if Boris would get elected, why join him in general?
No, actually, the Boris point is actually quite relevant in that case, because you're seeing this kind of in democracies across the world. You're seeing this kind of phenomenon of the comeback. So you see, Netanyahu, you see Lula, you see Trump repeatedly threatening C4s, attempting. I would like to think that no one is going to turn Boris Johnson into a martyr for if he does go to jail at some point. I would like to think that the British system has the people, despite its flaws, there is the common sense people that they're not going to turn Boris Johnson into a martyr. But anyway, just on the point, I don't think it's a very great sign of the health of Western or democracy in general worldwide that you have the likes of Lula who, I mean, Brazil isn't the, you know, if you look at the World Freedom Index, Brazil is not exactly top of the list in terms of protecting civil liberties or the transparency of its regime or of its institutions. So I wouldn't exactly use Lula's victory as like a shining example of like the triumph of left wing or the democratic values. It's very much not, and I think how slim his majority is just showing how fraught democracy and institutions are across the world.
Yeah, go for
I
it.
think that's actually just on that another point. I would have essentially used 10 years ago has the pink wave in South America where left-wing candidates were winning that produced potentially backlash. And we've seen that now. We've seen victories, for instance, of a left-wing candidate last year in Chile. His government is currently crashing and burning. He tried to reform the constitution. I think that got rejected by a massive majority. So I agree with the point. I don't think this is a massive victory for the left. And I think there's some reports that I think Lula had been quoted in an interview saying that Ukraine bears as much if not more fault for the invasion than Russia, which is a curious position to take, I have to be honest. But obviously time will tell, but I think actually one other point on Lula actually is interesting is he's the only candidate left of centre who's won substantial victories since the restoration of democracy in 1985, I believe. His protege did win elections. In fact, the Legality one suggests that the left of centre has not been very well in Brazil.
Thank you. Let's take one final point, yeah.
Yeah, just in terms of Lula being allegedly corrupt, if you find me one official, one person in power that isn't corrupt, I will tell you you're wrong, you just haven't been found out yet. I just want to draw attention to the point of power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. So, no, I would absolutely believe that, and I have no faith in any sort of elected or non-elected official at this point.
On that cheery note, we'll move on to... has anyone got a very quick point on a different topic? Yes. Yes. State your name for the minutes, please.
Daniel McCormick. I just have 2 quick points. Gary, is that seat beside you?
Yeah, this is your
And the other one was about Elon Musk and the way he's been going on.
I think
some evidently some mixed opinions.
I think quiet please.
I just wondered what people have to say. Like.
I think Elon Musk has been in PNB for the past 4 weeks running. I think like genuinely has. This is a popular one. We'll go. Yes. State your name for this, please.
Ellie Byrne. In terms of combining with Twitter and the whole thing, you can hear my opinion on that point pretty sure. But anyway, apart from the name drop before I talked about from previous private members' business, I think that already Twitter is going down the drain because you can now subscribe to have a blue tick for $8 a month. And it's got to the point that Tumblr has now changed its to allow nudity back on it again. So if anyone ever remembers, how the internet works, like Tumblr shut down and they all moved to Twitter, and now they're all recognizing that Twitter's going down, so now but other than that, I think Elon shot himself in the foot because with his whole thing about wanting to allow free speech, even if he doesn't, the increase of slurs on Twitter has increased by a major percent since he won over a couple of weeks ago, and Twitter makes its money off of investors. Already he's fired 3 of them and has paid him £15 million to leave the board because he wants to be the sole director. Twitter only is advertisements. No company's going to want to advertise their product on a website that is not soon going to be known if the slurs and the increase, and then also Elon does do what he said about freedom of speech. it is going to turn into not a very positive platform, and that will lead to companies pulling out in terms of investment, which is probably why they're doing the blue tick to try and bring money in. And I think the blue tick's going to end up like the Tinder thing. You know, like I'm pretty sure you can like get a premium or something on Twitter.
you can.
Okay, so it's going to be the new red flag. You can start talking to a guy and he's paid for a blue tick. It's like, why still says there? Can you find a guy?
Yes. State your name for the minutes, please.
Harry Boyce. I find it funny that he's going on about free speech because I saw earlier today AOC and him were bickering in it. He happened to actually restrict their tweets in a way that he said screenshot and he's saying if he went on her tweet, anyone had quoted it, it came up as like unavailable or something. So he's in fact he's actually censoring.
You gone mad, I think. Right. Yes. This will be the last one, so just stay Okay, good one more.
I find it very funny seeing the Twitter liberal checkmarks cry again on Twitter. What I will say is, if one of your main issues is that you have to pay to use, or to pay to have a stupid checkmark, you are the height of privilege and should shut the fuck up.
I'll have to take one more after that one. Yes.
I take issue with what Ellie said, that apparently that Twitter has now become a cesspit. On a giant rock. On a serious point, I said on a serious point, I think I said this a few weeks ago, I hope it would drive Twitter into the ground, and it's doing that, so I'm perfectly happy with the situation. But also, on the blue check situation, I saw some people were, blue checks were leading and saying, well, what if somebody wants to impersonate us? And I'm thinking, realistically, who's going to impersonate random journalists and have 5,000 Twitter who's got 5 followers? I mean, obviously, the larger ones, yes, but at the same time, would you really do that effort? I mean,
Alright, I have to take one more, and I'll take this one. State your name for the minutes, please.
Ben Ansell. Gee, I think you can disagree that you don't like him buying it, but to say Twitter's going to go down, I think by all indications, Twitter got less popular after President Trump was banned on it. It became a lot less entertaining. And also, I don't think the problem was, obviously, if you post threats and want to incite violence, you should get banned. The problem was, anything I disagree with, I can just censor. And that's what Elon's trying to do.
Thank you. So that concludes private members' business for this week. It is my seriously as a guest chair. Do you want to do person's questions this week instead of me? This is your opportunity to ask me a question. That was instantaneously ready to go. Okay, this is so those of you that are new, this is your this is your opportunity to ask me a question. Please don't ask me any. If you've got a question for me, you can pick your hand up, but okay. State your name for the minutes, please.
Judy Moore. So in the last few weeks, Taylor Swift has released her new album, and being the girl boss that she has topped the 10 top of the 100 top 100 Billboard, whatever it is, which is the first time ever that a man has not been present on it. So big up Taylor Swift. So what is your favorite song of Midnight's album?
I really like Anti-Hero, so big fan of that. But it's a fantastic album, I have to say. Like, loving like I'm a big fan of the acoustic stuff, but there was a lot of just pop there, which is like okay, but I prefer the acoustic stuff. But I'm a big fan of Anti-Hero. Thank you. We were listening to it on the way here. Yes.
This is perfectly innocent one.
You say that every week and it never is.
On the music thing, what is your favourite album?
Ooh. So there's this very like. It's a very indie album, Daniel, by this band in the US called Mandala, who've released, it's the only album I've ever seen or any album they've ever released, I've liked every single song off it. So I would send you that if you were interested. Thank you for that. Yes.
How did the tight school for Peter Pan costume? Would you consider them to add them to your everyday wardrobe?
I think you found out it came as the lettuce from Liz Truss, not Peter Pan, but I very much enjoyed the Halloween Pub Club. It was a fantastic event, as you should all have known if you were there. Thank you very much, and yes, I will consider for next week bringing back the green tights. Last one.
Another music related question. Are you going to listen to Joji's new album tomorrow?
Yes, we will. I didn't know his new album's coming out, but there we go. I will. Yeah, thank you. Good, that concludes person's questions for the evening. It is my pleasure to welcome, are you okay? Owen from, you'll get up in a second, whatever. So this is a joint debate with the QUB Politics Society, so it's my pleasure to welcome Owen, Chair of the Politics Society. Please give him a big round of applause.
To say I've never actually spoken at one of these before. This is only my second Literific debate ever. So, shame on me, yeah. Well, I didn't know it really existed until this year, so that was my bad, sorry. It's lovely to be here for our first joint event, though it's the Politics Society's first ever joint event, and our first one with Literific, so it's very lovely to be here and see so many people. I know as well that there's some people here who, from the Politics Society, who have maybe never been to a debate before, so I just sort of want to tie all that in for everyone and sort of say that debate is a fundamental element of politics. It's how we discuss things, it's how we change things, and it's how we get the conversation moving. And it's also one of the first things that you think about whenever you talk about politics. I don't know about anyone else, but I think of the House of Commons, I think of Dáil Éireann, I think of the US Congress, some places where I'm sure many people here have gone and want to go to work one day as well. And this debate, much like many of the others, couldn't have been more well timed, so well done Dáil for the turn card. The midterm election is just in 4 days, where the American people are going to say what they think of Joe Biden's presidency, really. And I'm sure that each and every one of them will be watching this on YouTube to see how this House votes, and they will really, really pay attention. I hope that they agree with us. Finally, if there's anything discussed today that you want to talk about after, anything that you have any issues about, please come to the Politics Society or the Literific Committee. We'll be more than happy to talk to you about it. Thank you so much again. I hope you all enjoy it.
And I'm very, very grateful for Politics Society for helping us out with this joint debate. So now we turn our attention to the vote on prior opinion. So this is your personal view of the motion. So if you think that Biden's presidency has been a failure, you can raise your hand now and vote with the proposition. Why am I raising my hand? I shouldn't be doing that. If you believe that Biden's presidency is a failure, raise your hand now.
Yeah, that's right.
What are you doing?
I'm going to vote the other side.
If you think that Biden's presidency has not been a failure, you can raise your hand now. Oh.
Stop it, line!
Raise your hand up now. Fine.
Sitting next to fake news.
23. If you want to, quiet please. If you want to abstain on tonight's motion before I lift your voice, you can raise your voice now.
I didn't know the Alliance Party was in America.
I'm trying to count, come on.
As a lefty, right, feel I could just make it 3 minutes and
Right, good.
Okay, do you have the numbers then?
So there were 22 votes for the proposition, 22 votes for the opposition and 12 abstentions, so the opposition had it.
It's all to play for, folks. But before we get to the debate, it is my pleasure to welcome Professor Tony Gallagher, who is, as of 5 minutes ago, the chair of the Literific Trust for this year. So Tony Gallagher is a professor of education at Queen's University Belfast and a former Pro-Vice Chancellor of Queen's. He's one of the world's leading academic experts on the role of education in divided societies, in addition to working with the Council of Europe and the International Consortium for Higher Education, Civic Responsibility and Democracy. Finally, he has also served as a member of the Literific Trust and is now serving as the chair. And I'm sure I'm very, very grateful for him to be here. As a student that's very passionate about education and who one day perhaps dreams of going into academics, as we talked about earlier, Professor Gallagher is a very strong role model of mine, and it's been a great pleasure to talk to him this evening, as well as on some very cursed Zooms and Twitter chats that we've been passing here. So it is my absolute pleasure to welcome Professor Tony Gallagher to help us.
Well, thank you all very much, and thank you for inviting me to come along and be the guest chair for tonight's event. It's already been very entertaining, so I'm looking forward to the main feast when we get to the debate. As Matthew was saying, I've been at Queen's an awful long time as a member of staff, but I was also a student here for a number of years as well. In fact, I've been in Queen's for such a long time that virtually my entire record is now based on things I used to be. I used to be the head of the School of Education. For one, it was also for a period, I used to be the Faculty Dean of Research for Arts, Humanities and Social Sciences. For a short period, I used to be the head of the School of Social Sciences, Education and Social Work, which is a reminder that the university keeps changing the structures, even when people sit in the same place, they keep changing the location of where they are. And as I said, I used to be, for 5.5 years, one of the Pro-Vice Chancellors. Back in my student days, I had a number of roles as well. I used to be the editor of PTQ, but I was very young at the time, which explains it. For 1 year, I used to be a sabbatical officer in the Students' Union, which makes me, I think, rare, possibly a unique beast who's been both PVC of the university and an officer of the Students' Union. Both were great fun in a whole variety of different ways. What about the debate this evening? Well, as you've heard, the proposition is that Biden's presidency has been a failure, and I'm looking forward to what we're going to hear this evening. Just echo the point that was made that this is a very timely debate with the midterm elections coming up just in a few days, when those Americans who bother to vote will take the opportunity to pass their own judgment on his presidency. I don't want to anticipate the debate, but I wonder if among the things we might hear on the table this evening is the idea that Biden sleepwalked into the presidency simply because he stood against the most incompetent, ill-equipped and inappropriate president in US, never mind human history. Perhaps someone will point to the fact, will try to conjure up a metaphorical pile of money on the table here to point out that despite the collapse of bipartisan politics in the United States and the most fractious political environment for generations, he still managed in 2 years to pass legislation which introduced billions of dollars of investment to try and deal with the problems created by the calamitous Trump presidency, the consequences of COVID, and help to try and rebuild. Or will someone say it's easy to spend other people's money and all it does is create lots and lots of inflation, which is going to be the reason he loses the midterms in the next few days? I look forward to hearing what everyone has to say, and I look forward also to the judgment of all of you assembled here on the quality of the arguments that are put forward. And just to conclude then, and to let the debate get started, I said that most of my career now in Queen's has all been based on things I used to be, but tonight I'm now the chair of the Literific Trust, so I'm something again, at least for a while. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Can we have another round of applause for Tony Gallagher, please? Very, very quickly, because I know we have some new members here tonight, I'm going to explain the rules in 30 seconds. So each speech is 7 minutes long. After the first minute, you'll hear a bell ring, which then is the point where you can raise your hand and ask point or information. To ask point, you basically raise your hand and say on that point or point or information, which then means that it's you can ask a question or a point that's 15 to 20 seconds long. Any longer, I will have to bang the gavel and say hurry up, because you're eating into someone else's time. it's up to the speaker themselves if they choose to accept or refuse that point of admission. If someone raises their hand and it's rejected, you can't raise your hand again and ask another point because that's considered barracking. Also, when you hear the second bell, that means that you can no longer ask any points of information for that person's speech. Finally, two other points is please give a huge round of applause after each speech is finished. And if you need the bathroom, please wait until the person has finished speaking and then go at the start of the next speech. But with that, it is Tony's pleasure to welcome the first speaker for the proposition tonight.
This first speaker is Grant Warren.
Thank you, Matthew. Thank you, Professor Gallagher. I must say it's an absolute pleasure to be back here at the Literific, which has been one of the highlights of my times at Queen's, and it's great to see such a strong turnout here tonight. It's also worth noting it was almost exactly 2 years ago to the day that I spoke in my first Literific debate, coincidentally also on the subject of the US President, who is probably better off that we do not mention. Anyway, we in the proposition will be arguing tonight that Joe Biden's presidency has been a failure, domestically and internationally speaking. It should be stressed that tonight is fundamentally an evaluation of Joe Biden's presidential record thus far, and even though I'd hate to upset the opposition, and even though it might be very convenient for some of the president's defenders, this is not a debate on Donald Trump as a potential alternative to Biden. My contribution will focus on the question of Joe Biden's domestic agenda being a failure, that his economic policy has failed, and that it is everyday Americans who are paying the price for his big spend, stimulus on steroids economics. Firstly, we have to go back to the situation that Joe Biden inherited in January 2021 to understand the economy that he inherited and why he's failed to live up to his own promises on this issue. Biden inherited a US economy taking its first steps in recovery from a historic economic contraction due to COVID-related downturns and a stubbornly high unemployment rate of 6.3%. That's 10 million Americans who had lost their jobs in the first months of the pandemic. It would seem reasonable, therefore, to say that Biden took over a very delicate economic situation, and it might even seem fair to cut him some slack. But when we consider that it is Biden's actions themselves which have resulted in the current economic malaise being as bad as what it is, we can begin to appreciate the scale of his failure. In Biden's inaugural address, he promised to level with people about the scale of the challenge facing Americans, and yet every action he has taken since has shown that he has ignored the struggles of everyday Americans. Instead, cherry-picking jobs growth statistics to demonstrate how much the economy has supposedly improved on his watch, but little do people realise that what Biden and his inflationary, security destabilising economic policies have done is to deliver a gut punch to the people most struggling with their bills and their cost of living. Biden's two greatest failures have firstly been presenting a false picture of his economic management, and secondly to pursue failed big state inflation fueling measures which hammer ordinary people. With regard to the false picture Biden has given of his handling of the economy, he and his administration have littered America with mistruths, and much like the famous epithet of the man himself, they seem to have become sleepy with the facts. If you take the headline jobs figures so central to this current White House's messaging on the economy, Biden added 10 million jobs in the almost 2 years since he took office. His administration labels this as historic jobs growth, and yet Trump saw a better jobs growth of over 12 million jobs in the 7 months from May 2020 to January 2021. In other words, Trump oversaw a better jobs growth at the height of the pandemic than Biden has in 2 years in office. Far from Biden's supposedly greatest achievement being a jobs boom, he is simply riding the wave of a natural course correction, with employers having greater certainty and confidence about the economic outlook than in the first months of the pandemic. Biden's administration has also claimed that he squashed down the unemployment rate from a high of 10% to 3.6% today. Again, I'm not sure if his advisors suffer from the same delusions as the man himself, but unemployment when Biden came to office was 6.3%, and this is agreed by both the Congressional Budget Office and the Federal Reserve, which is the US Central Bank, a full 3.7 percentage points lower than the administration claimed. But of course, it wouldn't be enough for me to simply criticise politicians for being selective with the truth. It's necessary to look at Bidenomics to see just how bad the rot at the heart of America's economy is. Firstly, Biden has prioritised high tax and spend on infrastructure, a lip service promise to deficit and inflation reduction, and he's prioritised a dash for renewables without bearing in mind the very serious energy security issues facing developed economies in the face of the Russian invasion of Ukraine. In this regard, he has truly cut off America's nose to spite its face. I'm not saying that it's not good to have goals and try to achieve
environmental goals. But what he's done is truly cut off America's nose to spite its face by cancelling the Keystone gas pipeline and banning drilling for oil at federal land. But he's even managed to mess that up because he hasn't achieved the requisite support in order to actually ban it. So he's, even on where he has good intentions, he seems to have ballsed it up. In other words, what message does this send to the US's allies where Putin's illegal invasion of Ukraine has occurred right on their doorsteps and has forced a massive strategic rethink about how Europe sources its energy? Far from it being the case that America is back, as Joe Biden so proudly declared on taking office, America is broke, morally and economically seems to be a more apt description. On the economic point, Biden's landmark budget reconciliation bill to pay for his near $2 trillion infrastructure package, the so-called Inflation Reduction Act, has utterly failed to reduce inflation. In fact, according to the Congressional Budget Office, this legislation increases the US deficit by $3 trillion over 15 years and has a negligible or even positive impact on inflation. That means higher prices for everyday people on their food, their heating and electricity, and the cost of filling their cars. This could easily be put down as short-term sacrifice for longer-term gain, but alongside Biden's fiscal recklessness, his management of the US's monetary policy has been even worse. US monetary policy is controlled by the US Federal Reserve, which is supposed to be the US's independent central bank. However, due to the growing influence that Biden exerts on the chair of the Federal Reserve, Jerome Powell, there's been an ever closer relationship between the independent bank and the White House. It is widely recognised that the Federal Reserve under Powell's leadership has failed to take rising inflation seriously, with it taking until last autumn before the Reserve raised interest rates to try and curb demand, which is the most potent weapon any state has in its arsenal to combat rising inflation. But Jerome Powell isn't just some wild, cowboy-like independent actor. He's the right hand of Biden, with Biden's administration just last summer describing inflation as transitory. In other words, they're two sides of the same coin. Well, guess what? In the 16 months since then, America has seen 16 months of continuous rampant inflation, squeezing working people even harder each time. Biden doesn't get the seriousness of the moment. His economically illiterate, high-tax and high-spend agenda has entrenched the steep, harmful rates of inflation we're now seeing. Indeed, Forbes now expects that we will see a US-led global recession by next March. Alas, here we are surrounded by the ruins of Bidenomics and Bidenflation. In conclusion, Joe Biden has since his rise to power constantly ignored the most pressing needs of everyday people in America. He's made the US more reliant on rogue states for their energy supplies at a time when European states, in full view of Putin's aggression, are seeking to establish their own energy independence. By any reasonable measure, Biden's presidency is a failure, as the very challenges that he faces have been worsened by the actions he's taken. It's the political equivalent of calling an arsonist to fireproof your home. I hope that you will vote with the proposition in saying that Joe Biden's presidency has been a failure. Thank you.
First speaker for the opposition.
Professor Gallagher, Mr. President, members of the opposition and members of the House. Joseph Robinette Biden Jr. is the 46th President of the United States, the oldest office holder in history, and has probably done more for the aviator sunglasses industry than the Topman franchise, Gloria Steinem and Jeff Lynne combined. Biden's election marked a collective sigh of relief across the world from all of us who value democracy, the rule of law, and the preservation of one of Earth's most finite resources, big hand. Since then, I will concede his time in office has been occasionally underwhelming, confusing, even sometimes embarrassing. However, looking beyond the verbal gaffes, of which there are many, Biden has quietly amassed an impressive presidential record in his first years in office, with some huge legislative wins, which have been on the Democrats' wish list for some time. He has been dubbed the most legislatively successful president since Lyndon Johnson, who changed the US forever with the Civil Rights Act, his fight against poverty, the enactment of Medicare and Medicaid, education reform, and environmental protections. LBJ's Great Society changed the trajectory of American politics forever. So the comparison to Biden's legislative record is testament to his work.
Not
yet, thanks. Many, including myself, worried during the 2020 campaign that Biden, as an institutionalist establishment figure pushing 80, would govern in a safe, centrist, unexciting way, being careful not to rock the boat too much or annoy those on the other side of the aisle. Democratic presidents in the past, including Obama, have campaigned in poetry and governed in prose, shrouding themselves in facade of modern progressivism, while acting in a manner that is quite the opposite. But Biden's record has shown a genuine commitment to progressive policies. He's passed a $400 billion student loan forgiveness program by extending the moratorium on repayment and reforming the system for future use. This is going to benefit so many young Americans, something which Biden can probably barely remember being himself. And it is something which I, in my final year of studies, would greatly appreciate. And just last month, Biden announced his administration would expunge federal convictions for marijuana possession and begin a review on its classification as a Schedule 1 drug.
That particular thing that he's announcing and his moves towards freeing people who are federally detained for marijuana possession and things like that, that actually, he passed something like that and he freed nobody. This was his policy position, and they did it, and announced that they did it, and they freed no one.
It's been passed in, I think it was maybe last month, sometime in early October. The review and the classification is still underway. It's barely properly begun yet. It is underway. We all know that bureaucracy and democracy can be slow. These things, we're not going to expect, a mass sort of walkout of everyone from the prison within a month. These things do take time. But this will directly benefit thousands of Americans who face barriers to employment, housing and education because of possession of a drug which is already in many states in America legal. And of course, this is America. There is a racial disparity with non-white users disproportionately affected by possession laws who will also benefit. Now, this is just speculation, and I'm not saying for certain the correlation does equal causation, but some of Biden's verbal gaffes may have been a result of his smoking some of the old Mary Jane. It certainly answer an awful lot of the questions that I have. Now, perhaps Biden's and the left's biggest legislative win is the Inflation Reduction Act, with its somewhat unfortunate initialism here, the IRA. Now, the IRA invests $369 billion in energy security and gives tax credits to families who want to fit their homes with clean energy sources or buy electric cars. It's going to create thousands of jobs in the clean energy industry, and it is without doubt America's, in fact, the world's biggest step forward in the fight against the climate crisis without raising taxes on low-income families or small businesses. No thanks. There is a new minimum tax rate of 15% on corporations and an increased levy on corporate stock buybacks. But this bill goes further than just climate provisions. It gives Medicare the power to negotiate lower drug prices for the first time ever, allowing older citizens to pay less for their medication. It also caps payments at $2,000, saving many people with long-term illnesses a fortune. Now, this all may seem like a huge, unwise spend, but it is going to reduce deficit by an estimated $300 billion. This act has been a long time coming. No thanks. What began as Biden's Build Back Better bill, which was shot down early in his administration, was negotiated, renegotiated, shelved, revived, renegotiated and improved until he had the support of his caucus. And I believe this is truly Biden's greatest skill as president. After 36 years in the Senate and 8 years as vice president, Biden understands better than almost anyone in the US the workings of Congress. He knows how to get things done. It was a long, slow, laborious process, but he never lost hope and has passed one of the most substantial and significant pieces of legislation that America has seen in a long time.
On that point,
Yes.
please tell me how this is going to pass in a House that's going to be controlled by Republicans, please.
It already has passed.
No, but he's essentially had a lot of, like, the infrastructure bill, for example, it passed through the Senate, but it needs to go through the House to be ratified. How is that going to happen?
The Inflation Reduction Act has been passed. Legislatively, Biden is perhaps less of a juggernaut and more of a glacier, and by that I don't just mean that he's old and white. I truly can't believe that I am saying this, but the IRA is going to greatly help in the fight against the climate crisis. And now I admit, Biden does not have the rhetorical prowess of Obama, the great purple prose for which he was famous, and he also does not possess the magnitude, let's call it, of personality which Trump had, and the great orange skin for which he was famous. But what he does have is an understanding of the operations of government. He has decades of experience, a quiet stamina, and an understanding of what America needs.
On that point.
No thanks. He has managed to pass gun reform legislation, a huge infrastructure and climate bill, and of course vital pandemic relief for Americans. His verbal slip-ups are hard to ignore, but the fact that he can make these mistakes and continue to deliver for the American people makes this a truly American story, as they would see it. One of knockbacks and errors with hard work paying off at the end. To quote one of his more recent gaffes, it can be summarised in 2 words. Made in America. One of his key election pledges was to restore the soul of America and to restore a sense of unity. America is more divided than it has been for a long time, with some commentators fearing a cold civil war on the horizon, if not already. A radical, conspiracy-driven cult of personality on the right has pulled America away from its traditional standing as the most powerful and respected nation in the world. And Biden's aim to reverse this is no small task, arguably maybe too much for one man. But he deserves credit for what has been done. Under his administration, the January 6th committee has investigated the insurrection, resulting in some shocking truths being revealed about the insurrection. He has broken away from the bitter partisanship which has split the country when he needs to, working in lockstep with Florida Governor and potential 2024 rival Ron DeSantis to deliver relief in the aftermath of Hurricane Ian, which devastated the south of the state and took over 100 lives. But he has done this without conceding or buckling. He has stood his ground against election deniers and has stood strong against anti-democratic forces. Dark Brandon doesn't take any malarkey. Joe Biden has defied and exceeded the expectations of many, including me. His folksy charm as the ice-cream-eating, sunglass-wearing character of the Obama era has been expanded. His Build Back Better legacy mirrors that of LBJ's Great Society, expansive, beneficial, progressive laws which work to better the American people, and far outweighs the verbal slip-offs and the falling off of bikes. He's established himself as an elder statesman, bringing knowledge and experience to the resolute desk. His election pulled America from the brink of democratic illegitimacy, and his record should be remembered as nothing less than a success. Thank you.
Okay, now we'll hear from the second speaker for the proposition.
Mr. President, Joe Biden on the 24th of November tweeted out for the whole world to see, America is back. After being inaugurated, he reiterated the sentiment in a speech in February 2021 with rhetoric that rivals FDR, Ronald Reagan or JFK. America is back. The transatlantic alliance is back. Kindness and compassion are back. Democracy is back. Diplomacy is back. Mr. President, America is back. Much like the titular sheep in the parable of the lost sheep, America has disappeared from the flock of the liberal international democratic order, but thankfully our great shepherd, Joe Biden, has brought it back into the flock. America is back. Mr. President, tonight I'd like to argue before the House that Joe Biden's presidency has been incompetent, useless and damaging to what little national unity remains in America. And I'd also like to judge Biden's presidency on several of the parameters that he set out in that address. What is the state of America's diplomacy? What is the state of America's democracy under the Biden administration? Now, in the realm of foreign policy, there's a lot to choose from. Biden's presidency is, for instance, seeing the outbreak of the largest land war in Europe since perhaps World War II, the near breakdown of diplomatic relations with France, and of course the bungled withdrawal from Afghanistan. Now, on the first point, I'm not going to stand here and claim that Biden was responsible for the war in Ukraine. That's certainly absurd. It's certainly an absurd point to make. But his administration has made some worrying signals regarding the conflict that certainly haven't helped the situation. Elements linked to Biden's State Department through the Atlantic magazine, which in effect acts as the brain of the State Department, has proposed decolonizing Russia. How somebody does that, I have absolutely no idea, but apparently that's a proposal. I suspect this is probably going to heighten Russian paranoia. Then Biden, in this March of this year, he was, I think, at the NATO conference, and he was asked, what would the US do if Russia used chemical weapons? He responded, quote, it would trigger a response in kind. Just what you want to hear the President of the United States say. His press secretary had to walk this back, something that has become sort of a meme at this point. And then there was a spat with France where the US strong-armed Australia into abandoning a submarine deal with France in favour of a US company, which left the French angry. Now, while seeing the French being angry is really funny, at the same time, it doesn't really show that the quote-unquote grown-ups are back in charge. Mr. President, diplomacy is back and the transatlantic alliance is back. There's also the spectre of Afghanistan. Now, if you look at Biden's approval ratings in 538, it's sort of like an X shape. It's sort of quite stable around 55%. And then August 2021, wonder what happened. Now, I won't regale everyone as to what occurred in Afghanistan, but let's just look at the basic facts. On the 8th of July 2021, he announced there would be a complete withdrawal within 2 months. Thus, Biden gave the military 2 months in order to plan this detailed and difficult withdrawal, all while the Taliban were gradually increasing their offensive. All this because Biden wanted a poll boost where he could announce the total withdrawal of the memorial service on the 20th anniversary of 9/11. 13 American servicemen were killed, all because he wanted a poll boost. When the coffins of those servicemen draped in the American flag were carried off the transport aircraft, Biden, according to multiple news sources like the Washington Post, hardly a right-wing source, repeatedly checked his watch and looked bored and decided to talk about his own son, who he claimed to be killed in Iraq, which is not true, and reportedly berated families who were angry at him. Kindness and compassion are back. Diplomacy is back.
On that point.
No. Especially you. Next we can look at the state of democracy in America. Just last night the president stated that, quote, democracy is on the ballot next Tuesday in the midterms. America could choose between kindness, compassion, diplomacy and democracy under the Democrats, or what Biden defined as extreme ultra MAGA, whatever that actually means, he doesn't really define, under the Republicans. Now, Biden frames these midterms as an existential fight for democracy and freedom in America. He's fond of stating, quote, this isn't your grandfather's Republican Party. In fact, he said this so many times that apparently he said this every few years since about 2005. So apparently Mitt Romney was too far right, and they should go back to the way it was under John McCain. John McCain in 2008 was too far right, and he had to go back to the way of under George H.W. Bush. And George W. Bush was too right-wing and had to go back to the way of Ronald Reagan. So he's been saying this for 20 years, which really suggests that what he's saying about democracy dying in darkness is, for him, really just electioneering. How else do you explain the fact that the efforts of Biden and Democratic leadership donors, in effect, boosting attention to the most extreme Trumpist elements who are running in primaries in Pennsylvania, Michigan, Arizona, Wisconsin, and other swing states? These candidates, that the polls believe, have a strong chance of victory. Thus, either the Democrats are using empty rhetoric about democracy being threatened by extreme Republicans, or they don't believe they're a threat to democracy and just don't care. Biden has in several speeches, in effect, attacked a significant portion of the Republican Party for promoting what he calls semi-fascist, extreme, ultra-MAGA policies. But then when he defined what it was, he included supporting deficit reduction and tax cuts, which is, let's be blunt, not really a neo-Nazi position to take. Otherwise, some of us in this room may end up as that. Now, if the polls are correct, the Republicans are likely to score quite a considerable victory in next week's election. Does this mean that the Americans who flipped from voting for Biden last time over to the Republicans who are concerned about inflation, crime and immigration, are they promoting semi-fascist, extreme MAGA policies? Biden one time famously joked about Rudy Giuliani before Rudy Giuliani became a meme, that his whole presidential campaign in 2008 was a noun, a verb, 9/11. Now, Biden seems to be quite reduced to just talking about a noun, a verb, and January 6th. Mr. President, if you look at what the Democrats are doing in terms of boosting candidates they know are too extreme, can you really say democracy is back? Mr. President, Biden has vowed to bring the nation together to be a unifying president. His approval rating at this point, about 650 days into his presidency, is lower than any president at that point in his presidency since polling began in the 1930s. Biden's average approval rating, according to 538 among all adults, sits at 40.7%, lower than any president in history. Biden is polling worse than Jimmy Carter, who likewise faced sky-high inflation, unemployment, a bungled withdrawal from a Middle Eastern country, Russian invasion of a neighbouring country, and a supposedly extreme right Republican opponent with a background in show business. That Republican, Ronald Reagan, managed to sweep to a 44-6 state landslide victory. Now, who knows what the next 2 years are going to have in store? I don't think any of us could say. But for a man who was branded by Forbes and the Atlantic magazine as being the most compassionate and empathetic man who has ever lived, is he really governed in a unifying and competent manner? Kindness, compassion are back, so long as you aren't the family of a dead serviceman or an Afghani refugee. Diplomacy is back, so long as you aren't French or live in a country bordering Russia. Democracy is back, so long as you don't vote the wrong way or you're a more moderate Republican in a primary. So, Mr. President, America is back.
The second speaker for the opposition.
Now I remember voting for Biden in the last election, which none of you did, so I think that makes me slightly more qualified. I did so somewhat regretfully, as I do with most Democratic candidates in the US, as I am a leftist in America. But he has surprised me far more than any Democrat in recent history. Joe has been, since the time of Vice President under Obama, been known as Uncle Joe, the laid-back, carefree counter to Obama's straight-laced personality. But we have seen this unravel into something greater now. I first saw this when he made the decision to pull our military out of Afghanistan. While being extremely controversial, especially at the time, it was only controversial because of the fact that it went against the interests of the wealthy and government officials who knew that continuing to cause chaos in the Middle East was a benefit for the military-industrial complex, but Joe was the first person to look this issue in the face and say, no, I'm pulling out. Presidents promised it before and never did it. There was no way, or so many past presidents said they would do it but never did it. He was the first to stand by his word. As a leftist, this was shocking for me. Go ahead. Go ahead. Yeah.
Okay, so essentially because of the US's disastrous foreign policy with Afghanistan, there's currently 1.9 children dying of starvation because directly of their actions in Afghanistan and afterwards under Biden presidency. How do you explain this?
I would ask you, our involvement in the Middle East has caused far more millions of death over the past number of decades since the 60s, 70s, 80s that we've been there and causing destruction, killing innocent civilians with our own weapons. So I wouldn't really say that we are directly at fault for finally taking the time to get out of something that we were making worse. So many presidents, as a leftist, this was shocking for me to see from a Democrat. When scrutinized by the media who asked him if it could have been done better, he simply said no. And to be frank, he was right. It was the first time I saw a president truly put the interests of the American people to the forefront. None of us want to spend more time and money destroying the Middle East for no benefit but imperialism. I would hope by now anyone in this room who is as chronically online as me is aware of the Joe Biden-related memes referring to him as Dark Brandon and using such terms as Brandonization when referring to his policies. This Brandonization has been a net benefit. As I'm sure my fellow opposition speakers will or have pointed out, there's student debt relief, a new infrastructure bill, pandemic relief, and so many more policies that will help the American public where it matters. And he calls bullshit where he sees it. Often referring to people as Jack and asking them what the deal is with this malarkey. Who is Jack? What is the malarkey? This is a question that can be only answered by Joe, but I think we can conclude that this malarkey is looming fascism in America, and Jack is his opponents who perpetrate it. And let me tell you, Jack, Joe's not standing for it. The memes created from this attitude towards opponents have also been a benefit in converting the usual pushover Democratic Party image into having a base that uses online spaces and platforms to show power and passion in ways that I have not seen in quite some time from the party. It's been helping to fight that snowflake image that is often used from the right to attack left-wing activism.
I'm not one.
No. Biden has been able to unintentionally provide a much-needed image change where he is not a pushover, but a stronger leader who tells it like it is and shuts down his opponents.
On that point?
No. Administration has been able to follow trends and not fall behind like the party has done so often in the past. We all know all too well how often Democrats fail to seem cool when they have candidates like Hillary who cannot help but make embarrassing vines talking about chilling in Cedar Rapids, or have Pete Buttigieg creating one of the worst campaign dances I have ever seen. When Joe introduced the plan for student loan forgiveness, an undeniably much needed and long-awaited idea that will help with the unaffordability of university in the United States, Republicans attacked this as a handout and as wasteful spending. They claim that students shouldn't be forgiven. Go ahead.
Yeah, so you can make this here point that Joe Biden's managed to create this meme culture surrounding himself. Well, I just found Martin Van Buren, the 14th United States President, Meme Society. It's a pretty solid meme, actually. I think that if you have a lot of memes about you, whenever it comes to assessing historical validity, was your presidency a failure or not, what people said at the time, it's like satirical cartoons, won't reflect that. So what actually has Biden done that will make us go 100 years from now? Yeah, Biden was one of the great things up there with FDR and the New Deal.
I think one of the ways that it's been an improvement is the fact that rather than from a Democratic base, we won't be looking back at him as being this sort of person who backed down immediately every time they face a challenge like we did with Barack Obama. He was seen as a great speaker and everything like that, but he failed to push through the policies that he promised he would. And many people look at him as a failure from the left. They claim that students shouldn't be forgiven for loans that they take out. As a response, Biden's White House administration made a list of every detractor of this plan, along with how much loan money they were forgiven for during COVID for using small business loans, saying who do they think they are, and showing that they are fine to be bailed out themselves, but refuse to help the working class whenever they need it. This is the type of messaging that Democrats needed, not defending corporate wealthy interests, but instead calling them out on hypocrisy and greed over the struggling working class in my country.
Go ahead.
A lot of the resultant costs of Biden's spending splurge have been people having a massive dramatic increase in the price of gas, the dramatic
It doesn't
increase
affect
in
gas
cost of
prices.
living as well. Inflation's now 8.2% when Biden entered office at 1.4%. Of course, it's an international context, but is it not the case that in order for a group of people to have a better tomorrow, people's day has become a hell of a lot harder?
I disagree for the reason that he is not directly responsible for raising gas prices, as well as the fact of the rising inflation in general as a worldwide issue. You can make the same complaints for virtually every Western democracy that has been failing to address this issue. I think it's a very difficult issue for them to address in the first place, and I think his attempts have been decent. We started Biden's presidency with a leader who is honestly unexciting, and initially I did regret voting for. He seemed like a typical centrist who would concede to right-wingers on every issue. But something changed partway through, and it signaled a much-needed change for the party as a whole. Many would criticize his changes as too aggressive, but I disagree. If the Democrats need anything, it is a rallying cry to fight back against the growing far-right in America, and to my surprise and the surprise of many, Joe is providing that. And I think we can all see that, as Joe would say, he's sick of the malarkey, and I am here for it.
Third speaker to the proposition.
Alan is the main speaker, so we have
So, I would like to begin my speech by saying that essentially a lot of what the other side has proposed tonight is either policies that will make the lives of general Americans completely worse, or it is stuff that puts bandages over the issues instead of actually fixing them. I will approach that, but first I'm going to approach Afghanistan, because it wasn't just a wee tiny mess up that was bound to occur. Oh no, it wasn't, my friend, because Biden gave his military personnel 2 months to do it, which resulted in 80,000 of American allies being escorted out of hundreds of thousands to be left to the Taliban's mercy, to be tortured and dismembered and killed for helping the US. So that's my first point. The second point is, yes, they had to leave, but the US has actually made conditions. The US has actually made conditions worse in Afghanistan since they left, because what has happened now is, because the US refuses to basically lift sanctions on various members of the government, it means that foreign aid, their entire financial system, has crashed. They can't get money out. It takes 3 days to get any money out in Afghanistan, which means that you have a very unique situation where you have plenty of supply, but no money to actually spend anything. So what this means is their foreign aid, all that kind of jazz, their budget, because of this, has been cut by about 75%, which has meant that hospitals don't have anything to actually give to people in Afghanistan who are dying of malnutrition as we speak, due to the US's actions, which they refuse to actually fix. No, thank you. So, I say, and that is Biden. He has not changed this. That's Barkin. He has not changed this, and because of this, there are people in Afghanistan who are literally selling off kidneys, selling their children to have money to live, and it caused about 1.9, as I brought up in my POI, 1.9 million children are expected to die of starvation next year, all because of Biden's A, bungled up kind of getting out of Afghanistan, and B, the absolute refusal to send any more aid to Afghanistan. and also the fact that he refuses to lift the sanctions that are needed to actually send money to Afghanistan to help them.
On that point?
Yeah, sure.
I just want a clarification. Do you want the US in Afghanistan or not? It sounds
No,
like
right, that's different. Alright, okay, so essentially it's different. There's difference between like, oh, send in the troops, send in all the governments, all that kind of jazz, and lifting sanctions that have frozen the entire economy. That's a difference. There's a difference between bringing troops out and freezing an entire country's economic system to essentially leave millions to starve to death. And so yeah, so essentially that's a thing, that it's a difference. So policy failures. So there were some policies that have been brought up by the other side in terms of Biden's successes. One of them that was mentioned was essentially the student loan forgiveness. So for those of you who don't know, Biden passed a thing to basically forgive some student loan debt. Up to about 20 grand, which negates the fact that the average student loan debt is 40 grand for a start. Second of all, it negates the fact that it's a one-off payment that they have to sign up for, by the way, to get themselves. It's not automatically given to them. And it hasn't, yes, go for it.
It isn't actually student loan forgiveness. You don't have to sign up for it.
Oh, you do?
No, I get emails about it. It says specifically you do not have to sign up for it. It will show up if you come up in under like the people who qualify for it.
Oh no, but that's what I mean. You're under qualification for it, but it's not given automatically. You essentially have to put an application in to get the student loan relief. Right, so that is a thing. Another issue with it is it's essentially a one-off payment. It does not fix the fact that to get an education in America, you still have to put out basically tens of pounds to get an education. It doesn't fix the fact that student loan companies are putting in exorbitant interest rates that are gouging every single student in America dry. Does not fix that whatsoever. It's a one-time payment that essentially will help some people out, but it will not fix anybody after it. So, no, thank you. So the next thing that I'm going to address is another thing which is here. Yeah, so another thing which is interesting, which I brought up in a POI, is the Infrastructure Act. So essentially, for those of you who don't know, Biden basically got this passed in the Senate, which is important. An Infrastructure Act which is going to be the cornerstone of his green policy. So he basically need more homes, more broadband, more electrical grids that would support the kind of more green energy that's coming in. The issue is, though, it got passed in the Senate. It needs to get passed in the House for it to actually be enacted. And guess what the midterm predictions are going to be, my folks? A House that is going to lean Republican. And that's the kind of main gist of this. If you think Biden hasn't accomplished that much so far, he won't probably accomplish much more, because the midterm elections in the Senate, it's quite split, but most likely to go Republican. With the House, it is quite definitely going to go Republican. Typically, the polls are outlining that out. So it means that we're going to have a repetition of what happened with Obama, where anything he tries to pass is going to get blocked. And that is the ultimate failure of his presidency. In doing this inflation reduction bill that my comrade established is not going to reduce inflation, it's actually going to make it worse, probably. He is alienated a lot of Americans. That's why his polls are so far down, which means that he is going to lose the election really for his party and not be able to enact anything more. And I've established that most of his things aren't long term, and that's why his presidency is a failure. Thank you very much.
Now you get a third speaker from the opposition.
for, oh Jesus Christ. Sorry for my voice. I'm not really well. And if you give me 2 seconds, my iPad's about to die, because no planning. Give me a second to restart my time, please, Matthew. Right, okay, so let's get started. Good evening, everyone. I am on this side. We're going to ignore what way I voted before. If you want to know why, I'll tell you in the pub. But it's not for any of the reasons have stated, so that's why I'm going to vehemently argue against. As I'm a big lefty, I'm very, very tempted to sit and play Bo Burnham's song right now. Why is the best case scenario Joe Biden? Yeah, in my opinion, it's unfortunate, but it is better. I'm not going to go on a bloody rant about what the alternatives are for Biden, but I will discuss the positives about Biden. This will be the only time you hear me say these things, so listen carefully. I'm sorry, guys, I'm sorry. Okay, no, because I can still, your argument still doesn't stand compared to what we are saying here today, and I will stand by that no matter my opinion. Domestically and foreign is how you broke up your first one. January 2021, economy was in recovery and there was high employment apparently under Trump. No offence, if we're going to compare the statistics that Trump brought under, do we remember that he actually took control of the WHO? Sorry, I'm really ill right now. WHO for the COVID statistics. Does everyone remember the graph of how the COVID was spiking and then Trump reorganised who actually controlled who releases the COVID statistics in the country? And next thing you know, apparently in the height of the pandemic, it was a straight flat line because we can trust Trump for statistics. So can we really trust his statistics on how high employment was before Biden came in? Also, if we're going to talk about this false picture of the economy and unemployment was lowered by 3%, that is still good. High tax infrastructure, I would really like to get into the fact that this side here tried to argue that higher corporation tax is bad for inflation. I want us to remember what recently happened here and how our pound went to shit and why it went to shit, and maybe take that lesson and apply it over to America. Sorry. Right, whenever you have inflation, lessening money in the economy does nothing. If you do not increase funding for certain things like the NHS, like workers' wages, no thank you, no one has money to spend. If you do not, people call it the pay rise spiral in the opposite way. They're like, oh, if we increase wages, then inflation will keep raising. That's false, because if no one has money to spend, the economy goes nowhere. So, if you take off money from corporations during a time like this by increasing corporation tax, because really what you don't want to do is increase national insurance tax or the tax on the individual, you want to increase the bigger companies' tax, because God knows Apple isn't paying it, God knows Amazon isn't paying it. How about the money they brought in? How about the money the big corporations brought in the past pandemic? No, I'm not taking any POIs. I can't be bothered. My brain's too dead. To be quite honest with you, I'm barely standing up right now, guys. Where was I? This is why I'm not taking POIs. Yes, corporations. So, yes, Amazon. American company, technically. Apple is made in California, they like to say that. Are they paying tax to America properly? How much money do they owe in tax? Let's be honest here, they're not paying it. If we increase corporation tax, we can get more money off them to help fund it. Also, no thank you, I told you I'm not taking POIs, please stop! Right, stop it! So, this side here, yes, sorry guys, this is all like a bloody fever dream to me. This side here, right, yeah, sorry. This side here was talking about, we talked about the medical bills going down and the caps on those prices for Medicare. They'll be able to argue their prices. It means that a £2,000 cost will be less. How dare we ever say that is a negative thing when we have the NHS and we take it for granted over here? Which I would like to say, in my opinion, you do need to spend more to get out of inflation and get out of an economic crash. That is how countries got out of the 2008 economic crash, was by spending more, not spending less. That is a mistake the UK... No, I told you I'm not taking POIs! Please listen, I know it's hard for you, but please listen when I say no POIs from here on. Thank you.
I meant to speak.
I do not know. Anyway, okay, so you were saying that the high corporation
corporation tax is bad. You were saying that he broke off the Keystone XL pipeline, which was bad. Who agreed with the Keystone XL pipeline? Because it wasn't really a big benefit and it was going over Native American nature reserve, so it was never a positive thing anyway. Second of all, you want to talk about green corporations and increasing green infrastructure being a bad thing for the economy. We're going through a fuel crisis right now. Wait, no, you did mention it. I have it written down. They did mention green infrastructure, please. Someone. Yeah, okay, thank you. Because you're gaslighting me here. Right, so green infrastructure was mentioned, okay? You want to talk about how that's a negative and we shouldn't be investing in that. And one of you mentioned, I think, investing in homes and stuff like that. Yes, you should be still investing in homes, but green infrastructure, what does green infrastructure do? As someone from, I think I don't even need to mention it, I think a lot of us know my background and things. You give me a good opportunity to speak. Green infrastructure, what does it do for the economy? Whenever Russia and other price of oil and gas go up, what should you be doing? Not investing in fossil fuels more. No, you go to the future alternative, because if you can get renewable energies up and running, you're then not depending on other countries and a fickle democracy system of other international relations for your own energy. And in fact, having renewable energy in-house not only increases jobs, it increases the local economy and it increases your energy supply and makes it cheaper so people have more money to spend in the economy, increasing the economy further. In a time of high inflation and an economic crisis, that is important. Thank you very much. Give me a second to find where I am. Because it does have to do with fine, because it was through his green infrastructure plan thing. Yeah, the IRA proposed thing. I have filled in last minute and I am very unwell. Stop! Okay, I've got 1 minute left and my phone will not let me go through photos. Okay, yes, you're talking about how 8.4% inflation in America is bad. Yes, inflation is bad to a degree, however, we are also in a much worse state and we have the NHS and an education system to help us. America don't, so therefore proposing to lessen student loans, how dare we as students say that lessening student loans is a bad thing, by the way. At any time, at any economy, it allows them, again, to have more money, better for the economy. I hope my logic is making sense here. And also, what Adam was trying to say, if I typed it in my notes correctly, but who knows at this rate, was it isn't automatic, you don't sign up for it. That was changed later in the policy. They don't need to give more money than 40 grand for student inflation. They don't need more than 40 grand. What's up? Yeah, just quickly, just clarify, please.
No, yeah, I was saying that with it, that like even if it's not giving out like 40 grand to everybody, you guys were arguing already that debt was an issue, so trying to give money.
Right, I have to stop you there. Okay, also in terms of the House being Republican, it is very, very unlikely. Also the way that the midterms work is it's kind of like a rejig where it's like a percentage of the House. It's like, it's not like the whole House in one go is up for vote, if I remember politics.
Yeah,
is it all in the Senate, sorry.
Forth, James.
Right, that one was okay. Right, typically anyway, if we look at history, the House is typically Democratic anyway, and it currently is Democratic right now. The things he's passed are better than past ones. I'm pretty sure it is, right? So, basically, what has Joe Biden done recently, okay? He has helped with the abortion. He hasn't fully gone out, but he's helped with abortion. He has student debt, he did. He removed himself out of Afghanistan, and I would also like to say that more people die in Afghanistan a year than they did when they pulled out. And for a military expedition to remove themselves from Afghanistan, it was actually pretty efficient compared to past history. I do not agree with Afghanistan in any way whatsoever. I think it was done awfully, but compared to what could have happened, it's a lot better than staying in a country where they don't have any business to belong in. And that is me done. I am very sorry. This is what happens when you drop out, and I am sick.
I think we should just pause for a minute to kind of catch our breath for a second there after that. So it's it's now our opportunity, sorry, to turn our attention to questions from the floor, saying as we didn't get many POIs through the last couple of speeches. So if we have any questions for the proposition, this side of the House, you can raise your hand now and I'll take. Yes, state your name for minutes, please.
Jimmy Warren. So the proposition have built up an argument as to whether Joe Biden should, his presidency has been a success, but sort of looking forward to sort of speculation of sort of his successor, whether he'll get in for a second sort of term, sort of what is your assessment of that?
Well, on the substantive point, Kira mentioned that because of his policies, this was the Democrats' opportunity. They recaptured both houses in 2020. This was their opportunity to do something that would have a lasting kind of impact and actually benefit the majority of Americans and live up to Biden's own lofty rhetoric. But so much as what's been said and what Biden's done, it doesn't actually have the long-term impact needed to actually benefit everyday people. So, for example, Biden doesn't seem to give a damn about inflation. He called it transitory in July 2021. This was the same thing that the Federal Reserve was saying. As well as his presidential record, it was watered down massively. Biden wanted a $3 trillion infrastructure package, but because of a guy called Joe Manchin, it was watered down to almost half its actual value, half of what it would have been. This isn't a success. If you look at the relative successes of other presidents, FDR had the New Deal, Truman had the 30, LBJ had the Great Society, Nixon had success in China, Reagan had the Cold War, even W. Bush had tax cuts, which by the way, Biden during the financial crash actually extended through his negotiation with a Republican-held Congress. It's really student loan forgiveness. It doesn't actually directly and completely address the issue, and some other stuff is a much bigger deficit and very high inflation. Is this really a success? What we should expect from a leader of America?
Opposition to respond.
So I think on that sort of final point about everything that previous presidents have passed against opposing houses, I think there's an important point to remember is the context in which America is in right now in terms of opposition and sheer bitter partisanship, the likes of which it hasn't been seen in America really probably since the Civil War. You said that his policies were long-term enough to try and help fight inflation. The Inflation Reduction Act is billed technically as a medium to long-term saviour for inflation.
No, back and forth.
There's an awful lot in that, in which the investments into clean energy are long-term investments. The investments into solar and electric cars and all the rest, they're all long-term investments. Student loan forgiveness takes an awful lot of debt off people who have to carry that things for most of their lives. These things will help people in the long term. I fundamentally disagree with what you're saying. I think these things do honestly help people in the long term. Go on to the first question about his chances in the future. Not all the polls are saying that the House and the Senate are going to completely flip, some do, some don't. It depends purely, I think, on what we see in the next 4 or 5 days.
Thank you. Questions for the opposition? You've had your hand up for so long, so I will take your question, yes.
Let's see. Biden, two opposite inflation reduction, climate change. How does increasing the volatility of money inside the economy that's by reduce I can't remember what by breathing hands long term. Okay.
Opposition.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Biden is inducing putting more oil in the market. How does that help the climate change? When people know that buy cheap oil, no buy car, no buy green car, no climate change. Sorry, I can't speak suddenly.
Yeah, opposition first.
This is the whole point of the Inflation Reduction Act. There's massive time frame on that, and the infrastructure bill which was passed in 2021. All these things are creating massive incentives to invest in green energy and invest in, say, electric cars, for example. Investing in getting cheap renewable energy into the US that is created in the US, which then sort of helps insulate the US from taking in external oil and external gas from other countries. This is what the investment of money into the US, into these sort of things, does help. The way it can help fight inflation and the climate at one time.
Opposition respond.
First on that point, yeah. So what Biden's done, and I referenced it in my speech, that Biden has made America more dependent on rogue states. So what he's done is by this dash renewables, and by the way, the third speaker in the opposition tried to claim that I said that investment in green renewable technology, green renewable energy was a bad thing. It wasn't. It's just, you understand that you have to wean countries off, basically, fossil fuels. You need to view natural gas and oil as transition fuels, because what it does is it makes people's today so much more expensive, so much more difficult, and it not to go into a rant about left-wing arguments, but making someone's everyday cost of living more expensive today is not looking out for the most vulnerable people in a society.
Opposition to respond. I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm sick as well. Any abstention questions? You've had your hand up for a long time as well. Do you want to go with question?
This goes out to both sides. Is Jackie Walorski alive or dead? And depending on which side you sort of you line up on that, do you agree with the president or do you agree with the president's press secretary, who vehemently said that she is in fact dead and that he was just mistaken on that?
Proposition first.
Generally, the White House put out a press release, I think, when the Republican congressman tragically was killed in a car crash. It was Biden's apparent words. And then I think it was like 2 months later, he did a speech saying, "Where is she?" I'm going to be honest, I do not want to do a speech here like people see people on Twitter who go like, "Lol, dementia Joe." That's a disgusting thing to say, but quite frankly, I mean, the point I alluded to here is his propensity for making not just gaffes, but just, quite frankly, amazingly incompetent statements is genuinely astounding. It's not even like Bush levels, where one of my favourite Bush quote was, "I believe in the future, people and fish can peacefully coexist." I don't have the context for that statement is, but it's brilliant. But Biden, as I alluded to in my speech, he responded to a query asking what would America do if Russia used chemical weapons, and said it would trigger a response in kind. Genuinely, I mean, aside from the dark grounds memes, which are just, memes, they don't exist it doesn't exist in the real world, this idea of Biden who's going to smite every Republican in Congress with the click of his finger. Fundamentally, Biden has, for decades, had a propensity to just making gaffes and just sometimes quite offensive comments, which I think we'll describe Barack Obama as the first eloquent black guy who won for president. Truly a lovely statement. So yeah, no, I just, on that point, yeah, really, Biden, he doesn't so much put his foot in, he puts his foot and it comes out the other side again.
Opposition to respond.
I want to draw back, though, to the fact that there's an argument about whether or not his presidency was a failure, not whether or not his personality is somehow likable or not. We're looking at policies here and whether or not he's had policy successes or policy failures. We would weigh up that in general he's had policy successes. We're also looking at the fact here that whether or not he makes gaffes and goofs about the things that he says, in general, I don't, again, think that somehow makes any relation to his policy. He's also not the oldest.
Clarification in a second. Or
I think that it really plays into the functioning of the administration when you have such a massive gap between what he's saying, he's the leader of it, he's the figurehead of the Trump thing, and what everybody else is desperately trying to clean up in the background.
I would say that's fair, but I would say for the reason that at the same time, though, we are looking at this, so like, is Biden's presidency, when you're talking about the presidency, we are talking about the administration. So this is the group as a whole and the policies that go through with that. Also, in terms of goofs and gaffes, I think that's been exaggerated more under his presidency than it has under past presidencies. When we look at things like Donald Trump, George Bush, when was the last president other than maybe Obama that we've had that wasn't horrible at public speaking and making the worst, most vehemently terrible statements other than the last two Republican presidents we've had? So in general, I think Joe Biden's statements are, yes, a bit of a miss, but in general, they're not doing the same damage that like a president like George Bush or, a president like Donald Trump did through their statements to the public. I think those did far more damage than his ever have.
Thank you. Apologies, we can't ask another abstaining question because we've so much to get through for the rest of the evening. So before we turn to the vote on speaker ability, I would like to very quickly invite Tony Gallagher up to give a few closing remarks as well. So please give him a big round of applause.
Thank you. Well, just one or two comments. Not surprisingly, a lot of the debate focused on the fiscal policy and the legislative agenda of the Biden presidency, and we had different views and perspectives on how successful that had been. Quite a lot of time was focused on the issue around Afghanistan, but perhaps we were all missing what a more dramatic change in United States policy. Since the Second World War, virtually every US president has had a huge focus on the global role of the United States, and very few of them have had much of an industrial policy inside the country because the market was supposed to look after itself. Donald Trump changed all that. He explicitly said he was for America first, and he really wasn't that concerned with what was going on in the rest of the world. In some ways, Biden is following a similar type of approach. He got a bill passed that put 400 billion to try and boost the semiconductor industry in the United States, and that's directly trying to divert reliance away from China. There's a sense that the invasion of Ukraine has been seen as a demonstration of the failure of engagement with authoritarian states, and so the policy now appears to be to move away from them altogether. So that was an issue that perhaps we could have gone into in a bit more detail. I was a bit surprised to hear the suggestion as a benefit to Biden that he was a fashion icon. Fair enough, that works. But the thing that puzzled me most was a point that came up in Adam's fine maiden speech about the law to rescind people who were in the convictions for people who were in jail for marijuana use, and the fact that nobody actually left the jail. Imagine it. Someone's in jail for taking marijuana, and someone comes along and opens the door and says, "You're free, you can go." What will the response be? Yeah, I'll go. I'll take my time. What's the rush? I'm not surprised they were relaxed about leaving. They'll go eventually, but there's no big rush. Anyway, thank you very much to all the speakers for an engaging and interesting debate. All of the speeches were clearly well crafted, well researched, and I look forward to seeing what impact they had on everyone here.
Thank you very much. Before we turn to the vote on speakerability, I would like to give and lay my much thanks to the Politics Society and for Tony Gallagher for giving up their time this evening, and for all of you for such a fantastic turnout as well. So thank you very much. So it is now my pleasure to turn our attention to the vote on speakerability. In the vote in prior opinion, there was one vote between the sides. So vote carefully, right? As I've said at every debate, this is not a vote on your personal view of the motion. This is a vote on which side you think has spoken the best. So if you think this side has spoken the best at tonight's debate, please raise your hand now.
We might buy you a beer.
If you think this side has spoken best at tonight's debate, put your hand up now.
It's quite interesting, there's actually 5 rooms on each side.
If you're abstaining on tonight's motion, raise your hand now. Do we have the results?
Yes, so that's, sorry, just running off from that. There's 20 votes for the proposition, 29 votes for the opposition, and 4 abstentions, so the opposition has it.
Thank you very much to tonight's speakers. We have one unusual announcement, which is that council elections are to take place, and the vote will take place tonight in the pub online. So we have 2 positions open. One is secretary and one is outreach. You can only vote if you are a member and a paid up member of the society, which is why you should pay up your... No.
Okay.
Just don't make it repeat it last time. So if you're a paid up member of the society, you can vote in tonight's election, which is why you should definitely consider paying your membership fees. Additionally, if you're running for council next year, you have to be a paid up member as well. So if you're considering running for council, you have to pay your membership as well. You can still sign up for membership tonight. You won't be able to vote, but it means for the likes of the events we have coming up that will be prioritised for members, and we'll have to pay fees for non-members. It will mean you get priority as well. So consider signing up and speaking to Jimmy at the end of tonight's debate. If you want to vote in the council elections, you can take a photo of this before the end, and you want to leave that up for a minute, and then if not, we'll post this on the Instagram anyway. And then I'll awkwardly wait 30 seconds for you to take a photo of this. So, do you want to go to the next one? So next week's debate is, please don't get up please yet, don't get up yet.